Hey, hi, hello. We're online, and because you're here, that means so are you. Welcome back to another episode of Set Status Online. And this week, I have none other than the wonderful Sonja Woolff as my guest. She's a critical thinker, a trailblazer, and she has this radical non-acceptance of the norm, which I adore. And every time we've worked together in the past, I've always felt very inspired in that sense. But I think particularly in this episode, what's so fascinating is we dissect the vulnerability of visibility, right? What are the costs of putting yourself out there online, and how does one actually stay empowered? And because Sonja has had a focus on working with women, we dive a little bit into the tactics of women feeling more empowered online. But I think this is useful for everyone. Enjoy. So yeah, I'm very curious because based on all your experience and all the work you've done, not just with her studio, but through her studio, how do you understand this idea of the attention economy? I think it's something that it pops up a lot when people talk about the internet or online life or digital things. But how specifically does this idea of attention economy impact you and the work you do?
Whenever I prepare for something, I always do the same thing I've done this for years, is when I go pretend like I don't know anything. And I went and thought, like, specifically when we think about the attention economy, what does that mean, right? And immediately I thought about it and I went, I'm not so sure. I think it really plays into this idea of scarcity. So, and that can be good or bad, but this attention economy is the thinking that our attention is a scarcity or a rarity, which is true. But I don't like to think about that when we think about personal branding, in that it's a bad thing. I think it makes our ability to cut through the noise, or the importance of us being able to cut through the noise, so much more important. But how do we then, as women, but as anyone who's trying to build their personal brand, like, how can we think about how do we tell our story in a way that resonates? And one of the things was, which is the most important, we spoke about, or you mentioned, trust, reachability, or relatability. And I think there's two parts of it. The one is trust and there's relatability. Reach, I don't think, is so important. And we often see people with huge followings that don't actually have such a good conversion rate. The most important is that you're able to tell a story that resonates with people. And I think, this term authenticity does make me squirm a little bit, because I feel like that has also been commercialized, right? How to be more authentic. If you pay $20, I'll teach you, right? And I find that super frustrating, but there is some value, there is still value in that idea of authenticity, because the moment you're able to tell your story from a place of authenticity, you're able to connect with people. And it's funny, there's a gut feel in two ways, I think, when we read content or engage with content, or we meet people. One is when you read something that's generated by AI, it's an immediate gut feel. You can feel like it's a squirmy, cringy feeling. And the second feeling is when you read something that's inauthentic. Maybe your brain isn't so aware of it, but you're immediately able to pick that up in your gut. And right now, the most important and the piece of advice that I always give to clients or people when I speak to them about how do we build our personal brand, so much of the focus is going from externally inwards, right? So we go, let me get all of the information on how to build my personal brand. Let me do all of these, right now it's really important to speak about X, Y, Z, irrespective of whether I care about it or irrespective of whether I really think it's important or have any knowledge about it. What I suggest is to build from the inside out. So what is it that I want to speak about? What is it that I care about? What's important to me, and what am I knowledgeable about? That makes it so much easier to build, because it's two ways. You don't run out of steam because it's something you truly care about. And the second part is that people can feel that and people resonate with a message that is authentic.
I feel like the rules of the game are, firstly, they're always changing, but I think they're specifically and very intentionally designed to be different for woman. So when it comes to that idea of like, being visible as a woman online, and this is something that, I've often thought about, is does that visibility come with a cost for women? And you can, a really banal, but I think a good example is how, the same creator online will be critiqued for different things, whether they're a, woman, man, or however else they identify. I think there are always things that people seem to point out, and I'm curious, specifically because you work so much with women founders and women entrepreneurs and solopreneurs and things, but how do those dynamics of visibility play out differently for women online, especially with the things that you just mentioned?
Firstly, visibility is not neutral, right? So, and it's never neutral. What I find so often though, and when I sit down with women, is that there's so much expectation for women to look a certain way. And I think that's something that really trips women up. If I tell you that if I sit, of 10 women that I sit with, 9 out of 10 women will tell me about an issue that they have with their self-image. Mostly it's interesting, or not so interesting, but we know that it's around weight, and that's irrespective of the age demographic. And it can often be a barrier to women stepping into or sharing their story, which makes me really sad. And it's so often something that we speak about privately, but something that we don't speak about so publicly. We speak about a difficulty around showing up, and that we have to look a certain way. Weight is a very specific thing, and it's a very shameful thing for many women. So the visibility is in no way neutral, because there's a certain way and an expectation of the way that women should look. And even if we move past that, right, then there's being able to, or needing to articulate yourself. And there's this like major pressure that women hold. Think of it as a cognitive load that men are not even thinking about. So I have to make sure that I'm going to sound really good on this podcast or on stage at this event. And then I have to also make sure that I look just as good. And that can be this like massive cognitive load to like really navigate through. And it's super tricky to be able to do that. It's the only way that I've seen women move past it is through it, right? It's like the most cliche thing, but you kind of just have to go for it. And that's the tricky part, is it's terrifying, but it is hard. Like the cost of visibility for women is you open yourself up to critique. And I find that really sad. I mean, we've all gone through, I always go through the comment section. I spend a lot of my time in the comment section of posts on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on TikTok. And the way that women are pulled apart really is heartbreaking. And you can see that same content being shared by a man, and they're critiqued, sure, but more on an intellectual level, like what is it that they're talking about that might be ripped apart? But for women, it's what do they look like? They're completely ripped apart. And that's awful.
So very practically, because I think you're 100% correct. Like the only way is through. And when we talk about this idea of, empowerment, which is very appealing to sort of take on, but, what is the best modus operandi here? Like, do I ignore that it's there? Do I control the narrative? Do I actively fight back or push back? Like, what is the best mental model or approach that you've seen?
The phrase "silence is an answer" comes into my head, and I think that there's a time and a place to call someone in. I don't really love to call people out. I think that there's an opportunity to say, listen, this is reach out to them. One thing, and it's not specific about personal branding, but it's something I've been thinking so much about recently, is listen, we could speak about why, but there's an inability for people to engage in kind conversations. And we see that play out in multiple ways in what's happening on the news, and the way that people take sides without being able to see the other side, and we should always be able to see the other side. Similarly, when people share something that you don't agree with, that's okay not to agree with it, but what are you critiquing, right? So as the person sharing something, the question is it worth your time and energy to engage with that person? I would say most probably not, right? Their opinion has very little to do with you. If it's critique in a healthy way, sure, there's a way to engage in that. If it's to pull you apart, then I would never engage with that. Sometimes I delete comments, or I suggest people, clients delete comments because it's doesn't need to be there and you can control it. That's the amazing thing about social platforms, is that we can control what people see. There's ownership over what people see. So if there's something that's really nasty, delete it. But also, if you think it's something that is worth your time and an ability, you want to engage with that person, take it offline. I always suggest take it offline or message them privately. But to have a debate or a spat is pointless and it's just nasty.
I think on a deeper level, and this is maybe getting into like the really intellectual philosophical part of it. So given that we only have 20 minutes, let's see how we get into this. But I think I often, when it comes to personal brand, I try to really put myself out there as a human being, as a person, as me, Jamiro. But then when it comes to engaging with people online, there's like a certain level of separation that I need to make, at least for myself, between me here and me online. So like if I get some sort of critique or that visibility has that, cost that isn't so nice, that I can still say like, that's not me. But there's like a psychological dissonance, and like I need to be myself, but I also need to be able to pull myself back and say, these people don't know who I am. Like, this is not a personal issue. This is more to do with them than with me, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, thoughts.
I guess it goes back to the question of authenticity, right? And it's a really good question because, okay, let's zoom out. What's the purpose of sharing? And this is what I always ask clients. If you feel a need to build a personal brand, are you doing that because that's what you're told to do, or are you doing that because you want to do that? Acknowledging, firstly, that we all have a personal brand, but if you're taking active steps to build it and you're investing in time and money in it, why are you doing that? And what is that message that you want to get across? Once you get that message across, we figure out how we get that message across. Maybe it's a boundary between personal and professional, and less about who you are versus what you put out there. Does that make sense? And a boundary is a very healthy thing. So maybe it's less about being inauthentic and portraying a part of you that's not true, but portraying a part of you, Jamiro, as the entrepreneur, who you could think about it as a persona, but it's not a persona because it's just an extension of who you are at work. So at work, there's certain things that we don't speak about, right? And at work, there's certain things that have got nothing to do with other people. And I really believe that there's certain things that you don't need to share, but it's out of context, but it doesn't mean that it's inauthentic.
And I think that segues into something that I also wanted to touch on in this chat with you is, because I think empowerment is really important, especially for women. And part of that is this idea of agency and taking back control and not just feeding into the systems that exist. But that is a big word. So like, what does that process of reclaiming power online for the woman you've worked with actually look like in practice?
So when I started my business, it was called Her Agency. And the agency didn't mean agency in a traditional sense, but agency as in taking control. And that was really important to me because what I found is growing up, I had always had this narrative, or I'd at least interpreted it as you take the job as you get, right? Like you get a good job and you hold on to it. And if you get a promotion, you take that promotion. And then the best day of my life now, or at least one of the most a pivotal day in my life, is when I got retrenched. And that really broke that idea of you take what you get. And it was the reverse, and it really made me realize how in control of my life I was. And for me, in the work that I do, I just really hope that, not even just women, I really hope that people can realize how in control we are, and that we are in control of the way that we interpret things. It's through our lens. We're in control of the jobs that we take. And that part of it is super important. What is so amazing, I think, and I feel so excited about the time that we are living in now, because we have an opportunity to really control the platforms and how we're seen. So this idea, we can think about different platforms, and personal branding, to me right now, there's so much fixation on LinkedIn. That's amazing, but that's one platform. And in fact, we don't actually own that platform. So it's something to think about. But it's still a platform where we can control the narrative. My suggestion is always to be able to be in control of the platforms that you can own. So social is a platform, but a website is a platform. An email list is a platform. A book is a platform. An ebook is all of those are platforms. And then also the most beautiful to me is we've forgotten, going to an event is, you are your platform. So we've kind of forgotten in this digital world, I would say a lot of post-COVID, because everything is digital. But we're seeing actually now that brands are like really picking up that audiences want to go back in person. So there is then this question of how do we show up in person? And I don't think digital will go away, but I do think that there's going to be a lot of focus on the way that we show up in person. And that's very tricky because we're less able to control that narrative. And I think that's very exciting. So taking back control of how does that play out then in what we wear? So if we've spoken about the different channels of taking control and owning that narrative and sharing, let me finish that point on digital to say, you control your narrative, you share what you want. We build in from the center out as opposed from like externally in. So what is it that you want to share? That's totally within your control. And then let's go to what do we wear? That's also within your control. And that's so beautiful because it's a way to speak before you do. And again, asking the question of, am I wearing what people want me to wear? Or am I wearing what I want to wear? And what's quirky and weird about me that I can show in my clothes? There's this, I'll try to find the post for you on LinkedIn of someone who she's a freelancer. I think she works in finance, and she must be in her 60s, and she wanted to share what it is that she wears working from home. And it completely went viral. She's not an influencer. She's not a fashion editor, nothing. But she is the super quirky woman who loves to dress up. She works from home. And it resonated with so many people because there was an ability to really show who it is that she was through the way that she dresses. Again, this question of people have an idea, you are a designer, therefore you wear this. You are in finance, therefore you wear this. Or you say this, or you speak this, or you have these opinions. What is so totally fascinating about personal branding for me, and that gets me jumping out of bed and jumping up and down in the morning, is because people are so unexpected. You just never know who you're going to meet. And when I sit in these sessions with women, I work a lot with men, and who they are comes out in this process. And I feel incredibly grateful to be guiding people through this process in many ways, which is a process of exploration and self-identification, where through personal branding, I've always said this is a commercial way to sell self-discovery, and it is. That's exactly what it is.
Brilliant. I think before we run out of time, one little last quick fire, because I'm just anticipating what a hater might say, and I thought potentially there could be this clothing is so superficial, and like, of course that's what women should focus on to like empower themselves. What would you say to that person?
This is such a beautiful question, because, and it's immediately like, it's a very devil wears Prada answer, but we all pick clothes, right? Like, all of us have to wear clothes, whether we want to or not. That's the reality, is that we like move through this world with clothes on. So you get to choose, and why not choose what is an expression of you? You could use that argument across many things. You know, you could use it about your home. Why stay in a nice home, stay in a shitty home? Because what you wear and what is around you, where it makes you feel a certain way. And again, who cares what that person is? Like, it's got nothing to do with you what other people think in that way. Like, that person can feel that way, and that's okay. But if you feel that dressing a certain way makes you feel good and is reflective of who you are, then that's what you should do. Doesn't matter what other people think.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider sharing it with friends and family that you think might find it interesting too. And if you're feeling super, super nice, then leave a review. It would be super appreciated. And yeah, I'd smile a lot. But thank you, and hopefully see you on the next episode.